Well, good morning. We do have some business to get through before we get started. Only about half of the registered people are here, but we're going to go ahead and move on and get started so we can get through our business first. Good morning. Glad you're here at the Grantseeker webinar. If you're having trouble hearing us, there is a number to dial in. It is on your screen. I'm Jackie Downing. I'm the Senior Director of Grantmaking and Nonprofit Support here at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. I'll be presenting this webinar this morning along with Valerie Knight DeGangi, the Program Officer for the Valley Community Foundation, Logan Roddy, our Grants Manager, and Stephanie Chung, our Nonprofit Support Manager. The goals of this webinar are to familiarize you with the responsive grant process and the other grant opportunities at both the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Community Foundation for 2023 to help see where your organization and your programs fit in with our grant opportunities. A few housekeeping items. The webinar is scheduled to end at 12 o'clock and we will make every attempt we can to end promptly at 12. In the webinar format, you are muted. You are able to type questions in the question and answer box, and we will be monitoring those and we will stop periodically to answer those questions. Please do not use the chat box. I do believe it's disabled. I'm glad we'll be able to concentrate everything in the question and answer box. It'll be hard for us to manage two spots to be able to find all the right questions. If we do not get to all the questions live and in person, we will take anything that has come in, give answers in writing, and send them out to everyone who has registered so that everyone has the same answers to all of the questions. This webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on our website along with the slides by the close of business on Monday. You can always phone in instead of using your speakers. The Zoom number is on the screen at this point. And there will be hyperlinks throughout the presentation. Those will be live in what gets posted. So for those of you who are just getting to know, the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven was established in 1928, and it's one of the oldest and largest community foundations in the United States and remains the largest grant maker to nonprofits in our 20-town region in the heart of central Connecticut. That region includes the 5 towns served by its partner in philanthropy, the Valley Community Foundation, known as VCF, which was established in 2004. VCF fulfills the mission of the Community Foundation in the Valley's unique 5 towns, Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Seymour, and Shelton. The 2 foundations work collaboratively to address the needs of and seize opportunities for their service areas. The Community Foundation for Greater New Haven works with donors to achieve their charitable goals with nonprofits to build a stronger community. We convene the community around important issues, and we're the largest grant maker serving Greater New Haven, making over $39 million in grants and distributions last year, including grants from our affiliate, the Valley Community Foundation, and the distribution to org funds. The Community Foundation manages an endowment made up of more than 1,100 individually named funds and valued over $700 million. We provide technical assistance to nonprofit staff and board members in addition to the financial support that we give in hopes to create a stronger community. Now I'm going to pass this over to Logan for him to get started.
Hello and welcome everybody. So for our applications, please consider the following competitive grant eligibility requirements that all organizations must meet in order to be able to apply. So applicants must be tax-exempt organizations under Section 501c3 or any applicable section of the Internal Revenue Code, or have a fiscal sponsor with that tax-exempt status. Applicants must provide services in at least 1 town of our 20-town region or one of the 5 Valley towns for a Valley Community Foundation request. So your organization can be located outside of our 20-town region, but it must serve at least 1 town in our 20-town region. And as you saw on the previous slide, Jackie had the map, but I'll just read the towns really quickly and slowly. Ansonia, Bethany, Brantford, Cheshire, Derby, East Haven, Guilford, Hamden, Madison, Milford, New Haven, North Branford, North Haven, Orange, Oxford, Seymour, Shelton, Wallingford, West Haven, and Woodbridge. All applicants must comply with all local, state, and federal anti-discrimination laws. Applicants who are previous recipients of a grant within the past 3 years must have submitted all required reports. And we'll talk about it later in the slide. If you're unsure if you're still in compliance with us, there's ways you can reach out and we can let you know. For program support requests, requests that generally do not receive consideration include religious activities, endowment campaigns, travel, previously incurred debts, and funding deficits. Requests that are exclusively for capital projects, which include building, equipment, vehicles, and other depreciable items, will have a separate application process that we will talk about later in this webinar. And then I'm going to pass it back to Jackie if there's any questions, and then for the next slide.
We don't have any questions at this time, so we're going to go on to the grant making for 2023. So 2023 is a year of transition for the community foundations. We are examining our grant making processes and the impact they carry, and we're making 2023 a reset year. Over the course of this year, we're going to redesign our eligibility criteria, our application questions, and our reporting requirements. We'll do this work for 3 reasons. First, to ensure that there is equity and access for all area nonprofits, to minimize the burden on nonprofits to apply for support and to report on the impact of their work, and to still gather enough information to tell the story of the impact of our grant making to our donors who make this all possible. All responsive grants this year will be 1 year. There will be no neighborhood leadership program in 2023 as we conduct an independent evaluation on that program. There'll be no new racial equity and creative healing through the arts grants, our REACH program. This was a program launched under the Stepping Forward initiative to help arts organizations through the COVID crisis. Our grants to arts organizations will continue through other funds named for the arts, and the 2022 REACH grantees will be funded for their 2nd year, but REACH will not make any new grants in 2023. Further into the webinar, we'll be sharing the timeline for all the grants opportunities that are open to nonprofits. But nonprofits that are in the community foundation service area are eligible to apply for general operating support grants in our responsive process. Statewide or multi-region nonprofits are only eligible to apply for program support grants, the program being their operation in Greater New Haven. Logan will go into more detail on this. If 50% or more of the people that you serve are in the 20-town region, then you're eligible for general operating support. If less than 50% of the people that you serve live in the 20-town region, you are only eligible for program support, and that program is the program that happens in this region. So those statewide and multi-region nonprofits will be coming in on the different applications still under responsive. And also new this year, we're going to have capital project support as a separate process. That won't kick off until later in the year, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to the next slide. So here are the opportunities this year that for both the combined organizations, the Greater New Haven organizations, as well as the Valley-based organizations. These are grant programs that we manage together, and the application is one door in. You can find these applications or information about these programs on both websites, and it is one set of rules for both organizations. We'll have three types of responsive grants this year. The first is our general operating support. Those are for organizations that are serving more than 50% of their population living inside our region. And responsive grants for statewide or multi-region organizations, those with less than 50% in our region can only apply for program. If more than 50% of your population lives in our region, you may not apply for program. You may only apply for general operating support. It is not a choice. It's based on your population. Logan will go over that one more time. Responsive grants. Again, you have to be living with your 50% of your population has to be within our region to apply. We're going to accept letters of intent on this later in the year. Also, a combined process are animal shelter grants for nonprofit animal shelters. The nonprofit management program for emerging leaders of color will be launching a third cohort this year. We'll talk a little more about that later. We'll talk more about the consultant support program, which is short-term small funding for discrete projects. The Basic Needs Fund and Community Fund for Women and Girls are determining what their grant making will be for this year. So we do not have details at this time, and we will keep you posted as to what's going to happen with those as we go on. And going on to the responsive general operating support.
Yeah, so there's two types of responsive grants. There's first general operating support. So this is flexible funding that a nonprofit organization can use to further its mission rather than for a specific purpose or project. So this is intended to be a flexible source of support. So you do not need to identify a particular use it will be applied to. It can be used for ongoing or new programs and services, as well as administration and infrastructure. So this really is an opportunity for your organization to be who you are. We really want to provide flexible funding in order for your organization to continue to fulfill its mission. In this application, there are ways to make for stronger requests that we recommend you put in your application. And this is identify other funders and commitments, identify partnerships with other organizations where it makes sense to accomplish what will address the need you are meeting in the community. It really asks you to have a long-term funding strategy, how you sustain your program when this funding ends, especially since this is a one-year grant. So we really want to know how you're going to bridge that gap once the one-year funding has ended. Organizations can come in for a maximum of $50K. And this is a jointly administrated process by the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Community Foundation. So if you have a responsive grant that ends in 2023, I'd really consider applying for general operating support, especially as I mentioned before, in order to bridge that gap. And then the second type of responsive grant is program support for statewide and multi-regional organizations. So Jackie kind of touched on this and that 50% threshold, but if you are located in Greater New Haven or the Valley, and more than half the people you serve are from this region, you cannot apply for program support. You can apply only for general operating support, as was mentioned in the previous slide. So this is really for, again, statewide and multi-regional organizations. And the program we're asking you to identify are the programs and services in Greater New Haven and the Valley. I think Valerie is going to stop and read for some questions. I think we have a few in the chat.
Thank you, Logan. And good morning, everybody. We have had several questions come up. I think we have answered them, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody heard them so that we are clear about the answers to the questions that have arisen. The first one is, do you have to have a physical location in Connecticut or apply, or is serving Connecticut residents sufficient? I think both Jackie and Logan have covered that really well in terms of you need to be in one of our 20 town service areas, either the 5 in the Valley or 20 in Greater New Haven. And if not, I think that they pretty much have shown, the 50% more, 50% less, than all of that has already been covered on the slide. If not, please feel free to pop that question back in. Can you share what you mean by no funding deficits? If your organization has developed any kind of debt or any kind of deficit from your program or your operations, we cannot support funding that through this process. So that is what we mean by no funding deficits.
I'm going to add a little bit there, because when the grant award is made, and the grant award, if you're talking about responsive, the awards are made in July. You cannot start a summer program in June and use the money you get in July to fund what you did in June. You can only use the money going forward. So if you have an accumulated debt or you have a program that has already happened and you want to cover those expenses, you cannot use any of our grants to do that.
Thanks, Jackie. And if you, the other thing is you know, as it relates to debt in general, we just can't fund anything that has occurred in the past, right? This is all about looking forward. So hopefully we've covered that for all of you. Can you apply for both operating and program support? I think has been covered. Our organization covers both the Valley and Greater New Haven. Should we apply to Valley or Greater New Haven or both? If you submit an application to us, we will make that determination once you submit it. So if the majority of your residents are in the Valley, then please submit the application to the Valley. If the majority are in Greater New Haven, submit it to Greater New Haven. If there's both, please feel free to just indicate that in your application, and we will take it from there in terms of how we will review this. We look at this in terms of a partnership, and so we will do that administratively on our side. Our applicants—
Valerie, I just want to add to that.
Yep,
it is
go ahead.
one application. There is not a separate application for the Valley and a separate application for New Haven. It is one application form.
Thanks.
And
Go ahead, Jackie.
right? So it's one application form. You don't have to make a choice. You just fill out the application for responsive grants.
I'll continue. Are applicants eligible for responsive grants if they have an existing grant that extends into 2023? Jackie, you want to answer that one too?
Sure. Yes, if your grant extends into 2023, yes. If your grant extends beyond 2023, no.
The next one, if you get a general operating support grant, can you also apply for a capital grant in the same year?
I'll answer that one because it was asked a couple of times. No, you can only apply for one, and this also goes to the Arts Council question. You can only apply for one type of responsive grant. You can either apply for capital or one of the other two. You do not have a choice to apply for operating or program. It is dictated by the population that you serve. You could not possibly be eligible for both general operating and program support. Either you are in the region and totally 50% or more in the region and you get general operating, or you are less than 50% in the region and you apply for program. You do not have the opportunity to make a choice. It is totally dictated by the population that you serve. So you can't apply for both.
There is a question about previous general operating support grants that were multi-year. The answer to that question is yes, this is a single year application for this process this year. And the last one that I see is about the 20 towns in this area. Yes, there are more towns in New Haven County, but they do not count towards the 50% population. It is only the 20 towns that make up the Greater New Haven region. Thank you all for your questions.
Right.
Keep
We are
them
not a county foundation, because Sheldon is in our service area. They are also in Fairfield County. So we do not serve New Haven County. We serve the 20 towns. So when you talk about the population that you serve, you have to pull out our towns that are specific to either the Valley Community Foundation or the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. So Valerie, does that answer all the questions?
One last one. Can you apply every year for a responsive grant?
If you apply this year for a one-year grant, you will be eligible to apply next year for a responsive grant. This is 1 year. Normally, our responsive grants are multi-year. Because of a number of factors in the reset that we're doing, we're making the grants this year 1 year, which is an exception to our rule. And it is our intention going forward to go back to multi-year grants as soon as we can. So the answer is yes. If you apply this year for a 1 year, you will be eligible to apply again next year for whatever one or multi-year opportunities there are in the responsive process.
Thank you so much. Back to you, Logan.
So for the 2023 responsive grant timeline, so I just want to make you aware that these applications are available online now. So if you go to valleyfoundation.org/grants and cfgnh.org/grants, the application links are available on those web pages. So we asked by February 23rd that you create, update, and complete your organization's givegreater.org profile. My colleague Stephanie Chung will have more information on this later on in the webinar. All applications are due on March 2nd at 5 p.m. And then after March 2nd up until July, this is when staff will review your application. So during this time, you may be reached out, either via phone call, via email for any follow-up questions or clarity on your application. Then all funding recommendations will be presented to the board in July. And then after the board approves, you will be notified of a funding decision sometime in July. And then going back to Valerie.
Thanks, Logan. So Jackie had mentioned that we are adding a new responsive grant type in this year's process, capital grants. And it's an opportunity for organizations to submit an application for capital projects like land, building acquisition, construction renovation, equipment purchases, and so on. Basically, the same criteria apply for this particular grant. You need to have a GiveGreater profile. You need to have had active programming for at least 2 years. Grants in this category will be up to $60,000, and 1 or 2 year grants will be awarded. Right now, we're working through the application. We don't have it set yet, but we will be getting back to all of you about what that application will look like. There will be, however, a letter of intent that is going to be due on August 1st of this year. If you are invited to apply, grants will be considered in December. Next slide, please. Thank you. In addition, we also have our animal shelter grants. We do this also in partnership with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. So this is both Greater New Haven and the Valley. And basically, the information and the application links are where Logan has said, both on the Community Foundation's website and the Valley Community Foundation's website. They are up to $7,500 per year, rolling applications for support for animal shelters. There is typically an 8-week turnaround for responses back to the organization that's submitting the application. And any independent nonprofit that gives shelter to animals in the 20-town region can apply for this grant. Next slide, please. We have had for the past few years a program for nonprofit management cohort for emerging leaders of color. This is current for leaders that are currently in leadership positions in Greater New Haven and Valley nonprofits, such as program directors, development directors, finance directors, and so on. There were 10 to 12 people that were accepted in the 2022 cohort, and it is basically providing that leadership development for emerging leaders of color. This flexible funding of $10,000 per year for 2 years, and the applications are going to be opening April 2nd with the deadline to apply on June 5th. Applicants must demonstrate a personal commitment to Greater New Haven and the Valley, and professional development and leadership pipeline development will be considered as well. The application will be focused on the qualities and aspirations of the leader of color, and as you see on this slide, not on the organization. The program itself is 2 years, which includes a 9-month course with the University of Connecticut and a second year of leading and organizational assessment and cohort meetings. Both of the applications, as you see, are on our respective websites. The Consultant Support Program is a short-term application for building capacity or board and staff work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Basically, again, this is for those organizations that are serving Greater New Haven and the Valley. It is for a discrete project. This funding should not be used as part of a larger engagement with the consultant. For example, we will not pay the first $1,000 of a $10,000 strategic plan. Consultant time and or out-of-pocket expenses are covered. We have the ability for you all to choose from a vetted list of consultants that we have put together for you, or you can engage your own consultant who agrees to work for an hourly rate not to exceed $125 per hour. Organizations may only receive funding from this program for one time in 2023. The award will not impact your eligibility to apply for any other grant program. And for more information, you can contact my colleague, Stephanie Chung, who you'll hear from in a little while, as well as myself for the Valley Community Foundation. Right now, Jackie is going to stop for questions and is going to be able to answer those that have come up while I've been presenting. Jackie?
Thank you, Valerie. So Kim asked if the slides will be made available after the webinar. Yes, indeed. The slides and the recording of the webinar will be posted on both the Valley's Community Foundation's website and the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven's website. I would expect that those would be up and live by close of business on Monday, so you can always go back and refer to both the slides and the recording. Will site visits be taking place for responsive grants? There may be site visits to new organizations that we're not familiar with. It depends on the volume of applications that we get and the nature of the organizations. There is no single answer for that question. It's a definite maybe. I understand capital grants is only available for orgs who have been operating for 2 years. Does the Community Foundation provide any seeding grants to new organizations based in New Haven serving New Haven residents? Absolutely. We'll talk more about our small grant program, the responsive grant program. If you're not 2 years in, that may be difficult, but the small grant program coming up will be able to serve new organizations in whatever way they need support to help them emerge as stronger organizations. Is a complete update to office computer or hardware software considered a capital grant, or can it come under responsive? So responsive is the heading, responsive general operating, responsive program, responsive capital. It depends on the price tag. So a capital grant is up to $60,000. We're thinking more that that's larger projects. If your office computer and hardware is $10,000, that might be part of a general operating support request, because what might come with that would be computers and the training to go along with it, and the software, and some staff team building work that goes along with bringing in new things. There may be some data management that would go with that. That's more general operating. If you're talking about a $50,000 project, that's absolutely a capital project. But if you're talking less than that, you might be talking about a part of a general operating support grant. If you get a grant in 2023, you have to spend that money that year, or can it roll over? So our grant period in the responsive program for the program or general operating would begin in July. You would have until next June to spend that money. And if there was still money left that wasn't completely spent, you can always keep in touch with us, always stay in touch with your funders. You can keep in touch with us and ask for an extension to spend that money going further out. Is there a timeline for consultant application and award? It usually takes about a week to turn that around. The maximum award can cover the consultant's time and expenses. Yes, the maximum there is about $2,000. So just keep in mind, these are small, discrete projects. If an organization applies for a responsive grant and is not awarded, can they also apply for a capital grant later in the year? Yes. Yes, because they would not be a current grantee and they would be able to do that. And there was actually one person who had their hand up, and I want to see if George, you had your hand up. Would you like to ask a question live?
No, thank you.
Okay, all right, just wanted to double check. All right, then that is all the questions for now, I believe, unless something's just come out. Oh, monies received in July of 2023 are usable in 2023 and 2024. Yes. Yes, monies received in July of 23 are usable through June of 2024. That's the grant. It's a one-year grant. So I see another hand raised. That's going to make it difficult. I prefer not to do that. But Lynn, you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I don't. I was playing around.
Okay, so I'm not going to answer. I'm not going to pick up any more of the hands that go up because they seem to be mistakes. Unless Leonard, you have something you'd like to ask? Okay, so we will go on. I think I've.
Part as well. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
It was a mistake on my part. I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to make sure that we're getting to everyone. If you apply, but do not, okay, we got that. Okay, so we are moving on to the next slide. These are the competitive processes that are only available to Greater New Haven-based organizations. The Valley Community Foundation has similar programs for some of these. So Valley-based organizations are not eligible to apply for these. Greater New Haven organizations are. You may serve some people in the Valley, but the Greater New Haven organizations can apply for small grants. This is a really good foot in the door. It's a simpler application. It is less competitive. It's a faster turnaround. Small grants can be for program. They can be for capacity building, which is building the infrastructure of an organization, or general operating support. We'll talk more about how those differ. Organizations are also encouraged to apply for sponsorships, Greater New Haven organizations. We also have the Quinnipiac River Fund. That application closes on January 20th. Those are for projects that protect and conserve the Quinnipiac River and its watershed. So that opportunity is coming up soon. And let's go into those grants a little bit more. Logan, let's talk about small grants.
Thank you, Jackie. So one big change with small grants, I just wanted to point out. So as Jackie kind of mentioned, kind of resets that we're doing here. So it used to be that you could apply every year. We've now amended that so you can actually only apply every other year. So if you were a 2022 small grantee awardee, you have to wait until 2024 to apply. And that it's so on. So if you are awarded this year in 2023, you then have to wait till 2025 to apply again. So please keep that in mind when considering interest for this process. This is a rolling process, so it's available all year round up until we run out of funds. It's an 8 to 10 week turnaround. We really try to honor that. This is a very competitive in demand process, so much so that actually we do not have the application link on the website. So if you are interested in applying, please reach out to me directly. Just kind of tell me what you're thinking of coming in for, and I will provide you with the appropriate application link. So as Jackie mentioned, there's 3 different small grant types. The first being program support, and this is for specific new or existing programs. The second is capacity building support. So this is for short-term financial assistance to build the infrastructure of an organization for long-term success. So examples of capacity building are board development, strategic planning, evaluation, capital expenditures, including equipment, building renovations, or relocation. So just to be clear though, funding staff is not capacity building. That is our third type, which is general operating support. So we talked about this earlier in the slide in the context of the responsive grant process, but you can also come in for general operating support under small grants. So again, this is for flexible funding to further the general mission and work of an organization rather than for a specific purpose or program. And as Jackie mentioned, and I think it's important to kind of repeat, this is a good entryway. So if you are a new organization, or maybe you've kind of been around a while, but you haven't received funding from the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven before, this is a good process to kind of apply for. So I'm going to move on to my colleague Stephanie Chung, and she's going to talk about sponsorships.
Thank you, Logan. Sponsorships may not exceed $2,500 per event or $2,500 per organization per year. Meaning an organization can come in for multiple events if the total cost or a total request does not exceed $2,500. Sponsorships support the costs associated with one-day fundraising events, either virtual or in person, or one-day neighborhood community events that encourage resident engagement. So at this time, I'm going to stop if there are any questions.
Yeah, we do have a few questions that have come in. So can applications for responsive and consultant support program be made in the same year? Absolutely. Absolutely. We'd love you to come in and get a little bit of help with a consultant that may help inform how you're going to spend those responsive dollars. So please do that. The new rule about every other year for small grants for Greater New Haven, is that the same for the Valley? No, we will get to the Valley. The small grants we were talking about and these sponsorships are only the Greater New Haven organizations. We're going to talk about Valley organizations shortly. So if your interest is a Valley organization, you can ignore the last 3 slides. They do not pertain to you, the 4 slides. You'll hear about your Valley processes coming up in just a minute. Can you apply for multiple types of small grants at once? No, you have to make a choice. It's one or the other. A general operating support gives you that flexibility that if you wanted to hire a consultant, and you wanted to work on a program and build your infrastructure, you could do it all. Program is specific to direct service programming. Capacity building is building infrastructure. General operating is very flexible. So that's the one that you would want to think about if you have needs in all of those areas. And can you apply for a small grant and a responsive grant? Yes, but you can't apply for a small grant general operating and a responsive general operating. You'd have to have a distinct need in either capacity building or program. And the total amount awarded would be taken into mind that you had a small grant already working on a project. If you receive a Valley small grant one year, can you apply for a Greater New Haven small grant the next year? Well, if you're a Valley organization, you would apply to the Valley for small grants, not New Haven. So I think the answer to that question is no. Can you apply for a responsive consultant, small grant, and sponsorship for a single New Haven focused event? That would be a very, very expensive event if you're talking about, so a sponsorship, a responsive grant is not going to fund an event. You can get a sponsorship if you're an organization that would like to come in for a sponsorship and a consultant support and a responsive grant. You can do that. And you can even come in for a small grant as long as it's not general operating support. We're going to take a look at the total amount that is awarded to any single organization and make sure that our funds are impacting the entire community so that we may take into mind all of the other support that you've gotten. And also take in mind the need for that kind of funding. But you can come in for a sponsorship for an event. You would not get a responsive grant for a one-day event, and sponsorship is only for one-day events. So I hope that answered that question. I believe that's all we have in questions right now. So we'll go on to Valerie.
Thanks again, Jackie. So you see that this is a very similar slide to what was presented before, and I have the honor and pleasure of focusing specifically on the Valley's grants. These are opportunities for all organizations that are serving Valley residents of Ansonia, Derby, Oxford, Seymour, and Shelton, which has already been discussed. The first one on this list is our community grants process. These are small grant opportunities for civic organizations to apply to us for programs, support, projects that are happening at the grassroots level out in the Valley. Typically, the grants are between $250 and $2,500 is the limit. The application deadline, as you see, is March 3rd at 5 o'clock. And the eligibility is for 2 or fewer full-time staff members. The one thing that you should note for the community grants process is you do not have to have 501c3 status to apply for a community grant. You can just have a checking account at a bank that we can transfer the funds into if you are successful in receiving a community grant from us. The next on the list is our sponsorships, very similar to what you've heard about from the Greater New Haven folks. For us, they are events and fairs. This is an ongoing process. The eligibility is, again, open to all of the 5 communities that we've already discussed. The application is again open for up to $2,500 per year, but I want to make everybody understand that this is either per org or per event for the entire year. So if you have 2 separate events, say that one is 1,000 or one is 1,500, and you want to apply to the Valley Community Foundation for support for both of those, that would be fine. Anything over $2,500 is not going to be considered. Our needs and opportunities grants are similar to what has already been discussed from Greater New Haven for their small grants. So our version of that are needs and opportunities. They are for innovative programs and emergency needs. This too is an ongoing process. We typically will give a response back in about 60 days. Once an organization has applied. The application is up on the website. It is open to, again, to all orgs that are serving the Valley, and it is up to $10,000 for the Needs and Opportunities grant. And again, 1 grant for needs and opportunities per organization per year. The last one is a unique grant process that we still have up and running. It is a partnership grant that we have been working on with the Valley United Way, the Valley Chamber of Commerce, and the Valley Council for Health and Human Services to continue to support both the response and recovery phase of the pandemic. We've still got some funding left and available in this particular fund, not a lot, but there is some available. And it can be found, the link to apply for it is very simple. It's a little bit different than the other links that we share with the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. It's a Google Doc, and you can apply for it on our website. The current grant focus for this fund, it continues to be on vaccination support and awareness. However, we have also expanded it to include support for basic needs, food insecurity, and so on. So if there is a specific question that you would like to answer, you would like to have me answer about it, I would be more than happy to do so. Again, these are small grants that is left over of the balance of the money that has been put into the Response and Recovery Fund. Next slide, please. So as I've stated before, the community grants are available to all of the towns in our region, or whose majority of services are performed in those towns. We've already talked about not having to have 501c3 or equivalent, and all the applications are up on the website. One important note for those who have been with us for several years and have applied for community grants in the past, you no longer have to use a specific budget form that we had as part of our application process. We still, however, are requiring you to put together a budget for us, and you can do that in an Excel spreadsheet or a Word doc, whichever will show your expenses the best. So keep that in the back of your mind, and also not just about expenses, but if you have any revenue to support your project, we would like to see that as well. Next slide, please. Sponsorships, again, one-day events. So anything from galas to a road race to golf tournaments, up to $2,500. With the sponsorships, you can see that we definitely need you to be a 501c3 or equivalent, or you can have a fiscal sponsor. So if you are not a 501c3, but you can partner with someone to accept the money on your behalf, that is perfectly fine as well. And again, up to $2,500, rolling applications. The one note that I would add is that please make sure that if you are coming into us for consideration for a sponsorship, that you allow for at least 60 days, if not more, prior to the event. If you come in under the 60-day window for your event, we cannot guarantee that you will be considered. So give us that amount of time, because it does take a while for us to go through the processing queue and be able to determine whether or not we can support your event. Next slide, please. Needs and opportunities, as again, ongoing programs and emerging needs. We've had everything from helping people with furnaces and challenges with their roofs to providing capacity building support for their organizations to go through diversity, equity, and inclusion training. So it is really a very open and a very accessible process. It is, again, for those that are serving the majority of our towns, if not one or more of them. Again, 501c3 must have a fiscal sponsor. Grants are from $250 to $10,000, accepted all throughout the year, and are acted again within that 60-day time frame. So if you have something that you feel could be considered under this process, but you're not really sure if it would be, do not hesitate to reach out to me. I would be more than happy to walk you through that process, and the applications are available on our website. I'm going to stop here again for any questions that have come up, and Logan is going to be reading the questions for us.
Thank you, Valerie. I think we only have one here. Is there a roadmap or questionnaire online to help organizations figure out what they could have qualified for and which best application for them? I don't know, Jackie, you want to take that?
Sure, I can. There is nothing online that is a roadmap or a questionnaire. It's so nuanced. We are going to talk more on a slide coming up as we get a little farther into this. And I will tell folks we're on slide 23 of 32. As we get a little farther, we are going to talk about the things you should keep in mind as you decide where you fall with this. So if you can stay with us for the webinar or listen in again toward the end of the webinar, that will be able to help you make your decisions.
And I think that's it. So I'll pass it back to Jackie.
Okay, and that's going on to me for the steps, 3 steps you should do before you apply. We want to make sure that you're putting together the best application you possibly can. We need to know that you've done some research before you get to us, before the application, that your project, your program, your thoughts
Eternal.
are fully thought out. So make sure you've done your research. Find out as much about the work you're doing as you can. Chances are someone else is out there already doing something similar. So know who they are. Maybe they can provide you with advice or support in what you're doing. There are lots of sources for information, websites, the wellness report on either the Valley Community Foundation site or the Community Foundation site, all the work that Data Haven does. Talk to people, understand our internal processes. Thank you for taking the time to do that this morning. And understand where your program or organization fit in and understand what your real needs are. And make sure you're talking to community leaders. Identify community collaborators and partners, public and private. No foundation, our foundations or others, like to be the sole funder on a project. So do you have others who can support the work or vision that you have? Start to identify some collaborators or partners in the community. And then make sure you are structuring your program and your request so that we can fully understand what it is you're aiming to do, what you expect your outcomes to be, how will you get there, what are you going to do, how are you going to evaluate what you do and report on that, and what is your budget? What is the full picture of what it's going to cost? Who are your other funders? Once you have all of that information in mind, you're ready to write your proposal. And then do be sure to have someone else read the proposal, because it may be something very new to us. We may have questions for you. If you let someone else read it who's somewhat familiar with your project, but not fully familiar, then maybe that person can ask questions that we would ask to save some trouble for both of us. So make sure someone else reads your proposal. And here's that slide about which one do I apply for. You really have to figure out what's right for you. So our responsive process, the deadline is March 2nd. It is a highly competitive process. The small grants program, the consultant support program, the sponsorships, the Valley Needs and Ops are all rolling programs. So you wouldn't have to meet a particular deadline. Which works for you? Can you meet that March 2nd deadline, or do you really not going to have this proposal all ready until April or May? What are the eligibility? Do you meet the 2-year opportunity, the 2-year in business eligibility? Is your operating budget over $2 million, in which case you would not be eligible for small grant opportunities? Are you a Valley-based organization? Are you a Greater New Haven-based organization? What's the eligibility that you match? What's the level of funding needed? If you had a $15,000 small grant, would you be able to accomplish what you need, or do you need to go for $25,000 or $50,000 in the responsive process? What type of funding do you need? Do you want that flexible general operating support? Do you really need help with and support for one particular or two particular programs that you're doing? Or do you need to build your infrastructure? Some time to take a step back to understand that building a strong board, creating a good marketing plan and development operation may be the way to strengthen your organization for the long term. What type of funding is needed? And when do you need the funding? The responsive process, the deadline is March. You won't get an answer until July. But with the small grant program, you'll get your answer in 8 to 10 weeks. Much more nimble. The consultant support program could be as much as little as 2 weeks or 1 week. If you need someone, a thought partner to come in instantly to help you, you may not want to wait for a small grant. You may want to have that thought partner come in as a consultant support program project. So think about all of those things. Where do you fit with all of the processes? And I'm going to pass it over to Valerie.
Thanks, Jackie. We are here to help you. We know that this can be daunting, and it is a lot of information to process. So we are committed to helping you as much as we can. And to that end, we are going to be having what we call our nuts and bolts webinar on Tuesday, January 24th. And as you see, it's from 10 to 11:30. each one of those half-hour segments are devoted to a particular topic. The first one is how to choose the right grant application, which is part of what Jackie has been talking about for the last several minutes. And then we're also going to be talking about each one of the applications, responsive, general operating support, multi-region and programming, the emerging leaders and the consultant support from 10:30 to 11. From 11 to 11:30 are all of VCF's grant processes, needs and ops, sponsorships, and community grants. And we will round out with Greater New Haven specific grants, small grants, and sponsorships. To register for upcoming workshops, there is both the registration link on the Community Foundation's website, as well as the Valley Community Foundation's website. Registration is now open, and we encourage you to, certainly register for this. You can come in and out of these workshops, which is a really great benefit. If you don't want to stay for the entire time, we totally understand that. We understand too that your time is valuable, and we want to be respectful of that. So keep that in mind. And we also want to share with you that you have the ability to reach out to us and to contact us for some additional information, which we'll be talking about later on. We encourage you to review the application that you are considering applying for before you attend this webinar, and then be prepared to ask questions very similar to what is happening right now during this webinar. Two things before I move on to the next slide, and one of them is to please make sure that you save every bit of work that you do on your applications. Having been a grant seeker before I was a grant funder on the other side, I know how heartbreaking it can be if you do not save your information and you lose it all. So continue to do that as you are applying for grants with us. And our former Vice President of Grantmaking, Sarah Fabish, would always tell all of you that no is not no forever, and that we are always here to provide that support and that assistance to you as you apply for a grant for either the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven or the Valley Community Foundation. Next slide, please. And I think that Logan is going to be doing this one.
Thank you, Valerie. So Blackbaud is our system for accessing all online applications and reports or requirements. So if you were awarded a grant and it requires for you to fill out a report, it will also live on this account. So if you have not applied to either foundation prior to July 2019, then you will need to create a new account and new password. So that existing account and password is no longer active. As mentioned before, applications are posted on valleyfoundation.org/grants and cfgnh.org/grants. Applications are accessible by clicking on the application link. So organizations must complete an application for consideration in any grant process. So we cannot accept PDFs or Word documents. All applications must be completed on this online portal. And I talked about the eligibility, kind of like the broad eligibility earlier in the webinar, but each process kind of has its own eligibility. So prior to filling out the application, you will be asked to fill out an eligibility quiz. And if you don't meet that eligibility, you will not be able to access the application. So if that happens and you feel like there's a mistake or there's something that you're getting tripped on via the question with the questions, you can reach out to me directly and I can kind of help you through it. And, if any time you're like locked out of your account or, there's a question in terms of if there's a requirement that's been assigned to somebody else, just let me know and I can kind of help you through that with that question. And then we're going to pass along to Stephanie, who's going to talk about Give Greater.
Were we going to stop for questions?
Oh, that's right. You're right. So Valerie, I think there's a couple questions in the Q&A.
There are, Logan. Thanks very much for catching that, Jackie. And I wanted to respond to them. One of them is I'm wondering if you need to be located in Greater New Haven, the Valley region to apply for an event sponsorship. Is a statewide organization eligible to apply for those as well? If your statewide organization is having an event in our 20-town Greater New Haven area or the 5-town Valley area, then you would be eligible for applying for a sponsorship. Does anybody else want to add anything to that? Okay, next question. Hi, I just tried to go to the URL to sign up for the workshop and it doesn't appear to, it says page not found. This is not my wheelhouse or area of expertise, so I'll pass that out to my colleagues to see if we can answer that question, please.
I will try to get that before we finish today and drop it into the chat and make sure that we have that. I'm sorry and when the slides go up on our website, the correct link will be there. Apologize for the inconvenience.
Thanks, Jackie. And will we be discussing the capital grant letter of intent on January 24th? As I stated before, it is a work in progress. I believe that we will hopefully have some additional information for that workshop to be able to provide to all of you. I can't guarantee that, but I will say that we are very much working hard on what we are thinking about in terms of criteria. And if we have the information available, we will certainly make it available to all of you at the Nuts and Bolts workshop. Okay, next question. If you have already have an online account, how do you access the application? I think, Logan, that might be for you. And similarly, the next one, is there one account per agency or an account for each person in the agency? If you can tackle both of those, that'd be great, Logan.
Yeah, so for the first one, so as I said, the cfgnh.org/grants and valleyfoundation.org/grants, that's where the application links will live. So if there's a process that you are interested in applying for, then you click on those links and then you can just use your previous account information. And I'll also say, you know, when you're working within these applications, there's a save process. And then thank you, Stephanie, for that. If they're, oh, she probably in the direct message. Yeah. So what I also say is that you could save while you're saving, you get an email directly and it can pick you back up from where you started. And there's also like an account page that I recommend you bookmark. So if you want to reach out to me directly after the webinar, I can provide that page to you. You can bookmark that. That way you can kind of apply and go back to all your applications and all your reports, and you can kind of give like a history of what you've submitted, what's in progress. So that's also very helpful. And then that other question went away. Do we know? I think I can come find it. Is there one account per agency or an account for each person in agency? So, I mean, I think there's contacts for the application itself. So who's ever filling out the application, there's going to be an account for them. We really recommend you kind of, as best as possible, kind of use like maybe like a generic email for the account. That way you're kind of not bouncing around. If there's somebody who does leave, you're very easily able to kind of pick back up and kind of log back in. There is options to kind of like combine accounts. So if somebody does leave, like a staff member leaves, we can combine the accounts, and then all the history is on one account. So there's kind of multiple options for that.
Thanks so much, Logan. And the last question that we have, can a school that is a nonprofit apply for grants? If you have nonprofit status and you are serving a residents in either the 20-town region or the Valley region, we would consider, if you have the 501c3 status, that should be fine. So thank you all for your questions. We're going to pass this on to our colleague, Stephanie, who is going to be talking both about Give Greater and the Great Give. Stephanie.
Thank you, Valerie. GiveGab, our technology partner, provides the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Community Foundation with two separate and distinct online platforms. One is givegreater.org, and givegreater.org is not the same as thegreatgive.org. both of which are platforms provided by GiveGab. GiveGreater.org is our year-round nonprofit database that is filled with hundreds of publicly viewable GiveGreater.org profiles for organizations, while The Great Give is the platform that we use for our annual 36-hour giving event. I am available to help organizations create and update an organizational profile on GiveGreater.org. Up-to-date, publicly viewable profiles must have an expiration date that is set to expire no earlier than February 23rd, 2023. The number of required fields has been reduced, but it's important to note that it could still take up to 6 hours to complete a profile on GiveGreater.org. Be prepared with organizational materials, including but not limited to the current list of board members, 990 tax forms, and financials for the 3 most recently completed fiscal years. So that would be 2019, 2020, and 2021 if 2022 is unavailable. If your 2022 financials are available, then you would be looking to upload and provide us with information about fiscal year end 2020, 2021, and 2022. Next slide, please. Registration for the Great Give will open on February 1st. The Great Give is our 36-hour online giving event. One of the many benefits of having a year-round publicly viewable profile on GiveGreater.org is that we use GiveGreater.org to pull a list of eligible organizations that can participate in the Great Give. Both the Community Foundation and our technology partner, GiveGab, provide a lot of support to nonprofits with materials, workshops, and one-on-one assistance. GiveGab can be you can contact GiveGab on either GiveGreater.org or thegreatgive.org using the small light blue chat icon that is located in the lower right-hand corner. At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Valerie to talk a little bit about reporting on the grant process.
Thanks, Stephanie. So these are reports for those of you out there who have been successful in obtaining a grant from either the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven or the Valley Community Foundation. If you become a grant recipient, we ask that you update us each year on the progress that you are making towards your outcomes through this report. Reporting is done electronically, and it's through our Blackbaud grant-making portal. Updates to the grant recipient's existing GiveGreater.org profile that Stephanie just described must be made if that is applicable. So if you need to make those updates to your GiveGreater profile, please make sure that you work with Stephanie to make sure that they are done. All reporting requirements need to be met in order to apply for any of the grants that we have put up on all of the slides that we've had today. So please make sure that your reporting is up to date. And I'm going to turn the presentation over to Logan to talk about the resources that we have available for all of the grants. Logan?
Thank you, Valerie. So at any time after this webinar, if something comes to you that you have a question, you want to do some follow-up, this is kind of who you should reach out to. So for general questions, Jackie Downing. For other general questions and technical support for Blackbaud, as previously mentioned, you can reach out to me. Reporting and evaluation questions and outcome questions, Kara Strawn. So as I mentioned before, if you have a staff member who left that maybe was in charge of reporting, or if you're just you just don't remember and you're unsure, you can reach out to Kara to make sure you're still in compliance with all our reporting. For sponsorship and give greater questions, Stephanie Chung. Animal shelter grants, Luis Rodriguez. And then for all Valley grant processes and general questions, Valerie Knight DeGangi. So those are your resources that are available to you. And then I'm going to turn it on to close up to Jackie Downing.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Logan. Thank you, team. We've been through all of the slides now. There is only one question is in the chat at this point. Will we be able to tell when we log in if our profile is expiring? That's your Give Greater profile. Yes, when you get to the dashboard for your Give Greater profile, in the upper right-hand corner, there's a box and it will either say approved or pending re-verification or pending, and it will tell you the expiration date for your profile right there live and in person whenever you need that. And you can update that at any time. You can log in right now. If you're having trouble with your login for that, you have to go to that blue chat bubble that Stephanie mentioned. We do not have access to your passwords. We cannot change passwords. Only the GiveGab team can do that, and they're really responsive. So go to the blue chat bubble, tell them you're having trouble logging in, and they will be happy to help you. Will the slide presentation be available on the website? Yes, the slides and the recording will be available on the website by close of business on Monday. So you'll be able to get both the slides and the recording of this entire webinar. So we finished just a few minutes early. If there are other questions, we'll stay around for 15 minutes. I know that a lot of this is new for this year. Again, I know many of you are here probably for the responsive process. If you have specific questions about that, we're happy to stay on and answer you. When we do the nuts and bolts session, we actually go through the applications for the responsive process question by question to help you understand what questions we're going to ask, and then the kinds of answers and the kind of information that we're looking for in the answers. The majority of the application for the responsive are your outcomes. What do you think you will get? What will happen to the people, the community that you serve because of this grant? So we want to make sure that you are giving us the outcomes that you are anticipating. Kara Strawn can be helpful in crafting those outcomes. You mentioned, are these funds pooled in the grant opportunities you've shared today, or are there other grants that relate to individual funds? Those are all pooled. Our discretionary grant making is made from for those donors who left us preference funds, which say they would always like their money to go to youth services or the arts or the environment, or those that have left us unrestricted funds that say use it where it's needed most in the community. Some of those funds are designated funds. Some of them a donor has left and named one or more organizations in perpetuity. We have no control. We do not change a donor's wishes. So some of those funds are designated funds. And some of them are donor advised. Some of them are living donors who make their decisions on a daily basis as to where they would like their funds to go. Again, we don't have the discretion to spend those monies through grant making. And some of those funds are organization endowments. We manage the endowments of about a little more than 100 other organizations. So those funds directly go to the organizations that created those endowment funds and are pooled with our funds for investment, much more investment power with a $700 million endowment than a small endowment that might be managed by one single organization. So there are no other grant opportunities that we share other than women and girls, which we're working on what the processes will be for this year. The Quinnipiac River Fund, which is a specific fund. The Progreso Latino Fund does do their own grant making. The Black Futures Fund does their own grant making. There are no application processes. Those are committee-driven processes, and the Basic Needs Fund. Those are committee-driven processes, and the committee decides what that process is. So again, not our discretion. They are donors who are driving those processes. And we'll stay around for other questions. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We really appreciate you being here and taking the time to learn. Make sure that you look at that last slide, the resources slide, so you're calling the right person to be able to help you answer the questions that you might have. We look forward to hearing from you in some process, and we're happy to be able to work with you, and thank you for all you do in the community. See lots of thanks coming in. Nice to see you all. We'll stay around a bit more in case you have a late question coming in. We're happy to stay for the late questions. It would probably be better to talk one-on-one about a specific question about your application, unless you think that it's a question that might be universal, that others might have the same question based on their work. I'm afraid the slides are not posted to our site yet, so we do not have a link available. So we can't share the link in the chat. We'll give it just a couple of minutes more. We're down to 19 folks. Thank you, Anne Marie. We're a fresh team this year, so we appreciate the feedback.